have a special live stream today. I'm going to be hanging out with my friend Russell Nohelty, who is coming on ComixLaunch once again. Russell, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm always trying to be your most brought on guest.
Yeah, I think you are definitely my most brought on guest. There's a couple people competing for that, but I'm not sure. Like you're probably the Alec Baldwin of ComixLaunch in terms of number of appearances. So
if I have to be somebody, I will take that for sure.
There we go. Hey, so for those of you who are new to Russell, Russell is a USA Today best-selling author of comics and prose. He's launched multiple 5-figure anthology projects on Kickstarter, has another Kickstarter project, actually has a couple of cool Kickstarter projects soon to be launching as well. And he also creates courses and other resources for creatives over at thecompletecreative.com. And so, Russell has been on the ComixLaunch podcast before, and most recently, he was actually involved in the 6-figure mastermind sessions that I did with a couple of other creators that have all share the commonality of raising over $100,000 on the Kickstarter platform. One of the things that Russell brought to the mastermind to get some feedback on and discuss back in earlier this year, I think it was back in March, or actually March or May, that we had this conversation. Sort of beginning mid-spring, you talked about how on paper you were having a great year, your best year ever, but it still felt like a grind. And I'm just curious, like here we are a season later, how have things been going?
All right, so some things have been going well, some things have not been going very well. So one of the businesses that I run is doing book marketing for people and selling courses, and that part of the business has just tipped over what we made all of last year. Mm-hmm. And so that's great. That part's great, especially because there's September, October, November, 4 months to go left in this year. So hopefully we can finish that strong. The novels, which was the big push that we made this year, is not going well, despite the fact that we've more than doubled what we made on Amazon last year, and way more than double what we made overall in online sales last year outside of Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. It's not been going well. We did have one book break even at launch, which is what I'm always trying to do.
Right.
But aside from that, the best that we've been able to do is 50% of costs. And as you know, novels cost considerably less to produce than comics. So I'm used to raising $20,000, $25,000 at launch in the last couple of years. And that pays for the book to be made, produced, shipped to everybody. So when I'm doing a novel release and it raises, our last one did, I think, about $200 at launch, it's quite a tough pill to swallow.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to dive into this because this is something that we haven't talked a ton about on ComixLaunch and on the graphic novel space. Like, I'm curious going into this year, because you said you've more than doubled what you did on Amazon in previous years, but it's not going well. What did you expect? Like, what going into this year?
I expected the books to cover production costs at launch.
And so roughly what per book, what was production cost?
Somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 per book. So I made some big mistakes in doing books. Yeah. The first was I made the calculation that if I made more smaller books for a smaller price point, then it will be easier to get people to at least try the books, see that they're good, and continue on. Mm-hmm. What I have found is that is an inaccurate fallacy something that you can get away with in comics, but novel people tend to like bigger, even if they're not as good books, than smaller, than shorter books. So I spent a whole lot of money on covers that I will never use, because what I've decided to do is take a lot of the novellas and or shorter novels and combine them into longer books of somewhere between 90 and 120,000 words. So every time I did that, I would do 4 covers. Wrap 1, which is a full wrap, is you can either get just the cover for an ebook, or you can get the spine and back cover wrapped around. And so that would be $500, sometimes up to $700-800 for covers. You can spend way more than that. And I ended up only using. So what ended up happening was I ended up with 4 books in the Katrina Godsverse universe, 2 of which have released, the Katrina books and the Lobdell Chronicles. So this is mistake number 2, is I thought that if I had a bunch of different series, it would be easier for people to get in at different places, and then like a sci-fi series and a fantasy series, then an epic fantasy series, then an urban fantasy series, and then continue sort of on with the world. What I have found is that is pretty confusing until you've at least set up the world, like one successful world, and then you can do spin-offs and such. So I've ended up taking the 4 books, so 12 books into 4 collections, and now I'm recovering them again. And I'm making it feel more like a series, sort of like Terry Pratchett, or where it's like a world or a universe, but they're different characters that are the leaders of that universe in each book, or the main characters.
Right.
So I've not only done $1,600 or something in those covers that I'm never going to use, but then I had to recover them all again, so they felt like one continuous series. Right. And so the books should cost more like $1,000 to $1,200 to make, but they ended up costing more like $1,200 to $2,000, and the Katrina series I think costs up to $2,400-2,500 for that big collection omnibus. And Katrina, so there's only 2 books out. The other 2 books in that series are all going to come out early next year. Okay. But the Katrina series has done the best out of those books that I've launched, and it's earned back half of what I put into it. Right. So I think I've got maybe a little better than half. I think when I did the numbers, I had something like $800 or $900 to recoup, and that includes bringing it to shows and everything.
So how many sales do you need to make, like, to recoup $2,500 on a series? Like,
so let's assume this is going to get really in the weeds, so I hope your audience doesn't glaze over. But let's just take Amazon, because it is the most common. It is where most people make most of their sales. So if you have a book that's priced below $2.99, you make 35% of the sales on that. So most books have a 99-cent series starter, free or 99-cent series starter. So on that 99-cent sale, you make 35 cents. And then on a $2.99 or above sale, you make 70%. So right. On a $2.99 sale, you make roughly $2. On top of the when you're doing a 70% split, they also charge you a fee for delivery, which is basically how big the book is. Yeah. So if a book is 100 megabytes, they charge you considerably more than if it's 100 kilobytes, which is one of the reasons why doing digital books on Amazon and digital comics on Amazon doesn't make sense, because the fee that they charge is almost bigger than the entire amount that you could make on that book.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things ComixLaunch is now offering creators the ability to distribute not just on ComixLaunch, but also distribute through them onto Amazon.
You have to ask for that. You have to specifically email them and ask, because this is what I'm going through now. I just loaded in the Katrina graphic novel, and the Katrina graphic novel is not showing up on Amazon through the Amazon ComixLaunch, only on their old Amazon thing. And so I've emailed both ComixLaunch and Amazon, and neither of them knows how to make this work. And they're like, send me some examples of comics that are doing this. And I sent them like 20 screenshots, because every big comic does this.
Yeah. Yeah, this is we're actually I've got the contract just in my inbox right now to see if we want to do that, and it's something that I'm probably going to do, just simply because if I don't like it's another channel, and it's a channel that I'm not going to do anything with my comics anyway.
Right.
so might as well go with it. But yes, so that's interesting. But I'm actually interested to look at the fine print there of that contract and see
Well, the
exactly
nice thing
how
about
those
the
things are charged.
ComixOlogy stuff is that the ComixOlogy files are quite a bit nicer looking than the Amazon files, because there's usually a ton of artifacting in the Amazon files because you have to keep them small in order to not, like, it could literally cost you more. If your book is priced at $10, it could cost you more than $10 to deliver a file if it's too big.
Yeah.
Whereas ComixOlogy prefers big files, and they give you 50% regardless.
Yeah, and they do the optimization for you. Yeah. So that's definitely something to check out if you are a currently on ComixOlogy, but not on Kindle and Amazon. ComixOlogy is trying to branch out there. Obviously, they'll take more of a percentage than it would be if you were working directly with Amazon, I believe. But you do avoid some of that other stuff that could bite you.
Well, the nice thing is that ComixOlogy is a 50-50 split. So, like, there's no delivery fee or anything. They instead they take an extra 20%, but you know what you're going to get every month also, instead of if their pricing changes on Amazon or you re-upload a file, it could be worse quality. Like, I do not like how my books look on Amazon. They are only on Amazon because there wasn't this issue. So I am very excited to get ComixOlogy for all of our books to be able to do both of those things, because it's well worth that 20% to get nice, big, huge files.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I see we've got some folks that are tuning in live. What's up, everybody? What's up, Rob? What's up, Moana? What's up, Jack? Matt? John? What's up? We've got some questions coming in here too. And so just so you know, I've got some questions lined up that things that I wanted to talk to Russell about, but we'll also save some time at the end for some lightning round questions and some questions from the audience and I've also pulled some questions from Russell's Facebook group that he runs. Some good stuff got dropped there as well. So I want to keep talking about this, about the Amazon strategy coming into this year. I was actually in one of the mastermind sessions that with the groups that I run. There was a creator there who, I won't get into the specifics of it, but he basically presented something that he has done, and it worked well, and he was happy with how it went. And his question was all about how he can do something completely different and get something else completely different to work. And I actually cited you as an example of a creator who I think is pretty excellent. One of your superpowers is when you find something that works, you often double, triple, quadruple down on it, right? So, you finally start getting conventions to work, and then the next year you double the number of questions or quadruple the number of conventions you go to, and as a result, do better. Or you get a comics anthology to hit, and then you double down on that, and your next one, does significantly more, and the next one even better, right? And so that I think is one of the things that you realize the power of mailing list builders, and so you quadruple down on mailing list builders, and you build probably the biggest list of people that get into mailing list builders in our space, right? And so I guess I'm curious, like, what are some things that you're going all in on right now, and what are some things that maybe you're letting go of or putting to the side lately?
This is a big question. So I do think that the reason that I'm able to do that is because I try a ton of stuff and looking for the things that hit. And then I'm able to give attention to each product and see if there's traction there. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has upset me in the way that I've been launching this year is that I have not been able to properly vet each product and see if it should be continued. And so the one thing that we're doubling down on is my book, Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, which was the first book that I ever brought to Kickstarter. And it was supposed to go end of life earlier this year. And it did go end of life earlier this year. It was done. It had gone through 7 printings, and we were very happy. I was happy. I'd made my peace with the fact that Ichabod was done. But because of the Cthulhu book, which is behind me, suddenly there's this whole new audience that likes creepy, cute, like dark fantasy monster things. And every person who liked the Cthulhu book would come and ask me about Ichabod. And now Ichabod's been gaining steam for a number of years, but people started getting really upset that there was not more Ichabod to buy or to use, there's not even any to buy. We sold out of it the last. I somehow found one more box, which is like the magic of Ichabod, is I keep finding one more box for like the last year. But we finally ran out of the last box at Comic-Con, and people have just been like voraciously trying to get more of Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter. And so that combined with the fact that the novels weren't doing so well, led me in May of this year to ask Renzo Podesta, the original artist, if he wanted to do more. And so I'm like, we're doing, because this was not in the plan, we're trying to raise, the Kickstarter that we're starting is to raise money to reprint the 8th printing of the first volume, and then issue 5, and hopefully just for me to know if there's enough interest for me to continue the book. And if, I'm ready to make 100 issues of Ichabod if people are willing to do it, because while I do think that I doubled down on some things, I also feel like I abandoned things way too quickly as well, because Ichabod was a book people have been asking me for 5 years. Since the book launched, people have been asking me for more. But there was a special quality in Ichabod that people just never stopped talking to me about it. Like in the 5 years, the interest has never died off in Ichabod. If anything, it's gotten more and more and more. So that is one that we're doubling down on. Also, the Cthulhu anthology, we're doubling down on.
Yep.
The good shows, we're doubling down on doing bigger shows next year, but not a lot of the smaller shows, just a lot of the bigger shows. And things I'm pulling back on, because you only have so many things to hit, is I'm pulling back on writing books for sure, because they have not proven to be profitable yet. Granted, we haven't launched our whole slate, so I don't know how the whole slate's going to go, but I'm pulling back on writing books for sure. And more, it's less because I don't want to write, and more because I want to give the books that we have a chance to grow. Ichabod had 5 years, and really 8 years, to build itself up into the powerhouse that it had become. Katrina had 5 years. Pixie Dust had 2 or 3 years to build up. And then once we launched it, they've been profitable. And the books just, I'm trying to break a new format and a new market. And it was my own hubris thinking that like people would just follow me into, even though it was Katrina and it was more Katrina stories. The reason I thought that the Gods verse at least could break even was it was more Katrina books, and people have been asking me for more Katrina books. So I figured they would more readily change format. And when that didn't work, that's when I was like, well, Ichabod can stay. It's an Ichabod book, and it's the same format. And it's the same with the Cthulhu book. It's the same format. The other thing that I'm pulling back on, as much as I love it, is I'm producing less courses than I did last year. I think I've got a good stable of courses, and now it's a lot more finding the audience. I'm also probably going to stop my daily blog this year. I'm doing a daily blog. I've been doing it for most of this year. I'm not going to be doing it daily moving forward.
And you had written like ahead, right? A tremendous amount.
Well, that's why I'm still doing it. Like I'm not writing daily anymore, but I'm writing and I found that I was just writing the same stuff like every 2 weeks. It would be the exact same post. And as I was going through, like getting them set up to run, I was like, this is exactly the thing I've just talked about. Like I just read this post and not like 2 weeks ago, it was like 20 minutes ago, even though it's scheduled to run like 3 weeks before.
It's funny though, like I watched the video, like I was just flipping through and a short like 30-second Gary V clip came up, and he was basically saying, he's like, listen to me, listen to what I'm saying. He's like, I say the same damn thing every single, like all I'm saying is the same thing over and over again, but saying it in different ways. Sometimes that's all right. I mean, people are still going to church. I'm pretty sure they haven't really updated the Bible in a while. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I do see, hearing things different ways and keeping the principles the same. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah,
but
I think that the blog just has not caught on in the way that I thought it would.
Yeah.
But what we're doubling down on, I'm going to be relaunching my podcast.
Yep.
As rebranded as The Complete Creative. I've got 5 interviews already lined up, and it's really just me being too chicken to launch it because and then I'm launching a second book for my Complete Creative series. The first one was How to Build a Creative Career. The next one's How to Become a Successful Author. So the things that I'm doing now are, like you mentioned, things that have been wildly successful for me, and just iterating on them. Right. The Cthulhu book was an iteration of the Monster Anthology, and the podcast is just an iteration of the last podcast. And there's just a better chance that those things are going to succeed. And in 2020, instead of trying everything, I feel like someone told me, it may have been you, that you have basically a year. You are a cowboy, and you've got a gun with 6 bullets in it, and every year you can take 6 shots. And I've been trying to spray shots the last year or so, and I'm ready. I think it's important to do that when you begin. Like, I don't regret writing any of those novels because it told me what kind of stuff I wanted to write, specifically what themes I wanted to take, and what stuff kept reappearing in my work, so that I know the genres that I want to focus on. But now it's about maximizing every opportunity and supercharging it, so that now what I have found is that it's a lot easier to draw people into first books when you've got 10 books. It's very, very hard for me to talk about every single book when you've got a bunch of stuff. But because Ichabod's had so long to gestate, I can keep pushing back to that one. And I've been pushing back to Ichabod for 5 years, and people have seen it. People know about it. And I think that at the beginning of your career, I didn't realize how hard it would be in 5 years to talk about all of the stuff.
Yeah. I've used the analogy before, but it's like, can you imagine if any actor went on the Tonight Show and then spent the entire 5-minute interview talking about his entire filmography, as opposed to the new thing or the next thing? It becomes tough, especially when you at conventions or even even an Amazon page. I'm going to the Russell Nohelty Amazon page. I've pulled that up, and you're right. It is kind of like people want to know, where do I begin, right? And right. Being able to find those entry points can be a challenge. I'm curious. You said that it didn't seem like the people were following you that were supporting your comics and graphic novels through your Kickstarter launches and conventions did not follow you to Amazon. And I'm curious, is that a numbers thing, or is it entirely, or is it possible, were the numbers in terms of sales similar to what you were doing?
No, they were way less.
They were way less. So even the fact that you're taking home 34 cents instead of $30 on a it's
right.
It's
There were less
less,
people.
yeah.
By many less. And frankly, that could have been because people just don't. A lot of comic readers aren't novel readers, although that has not been my experience. I feel like there is a lot of crossover, not 100% crossover, but I do feel like there is crossover there. It could be because people just don't like Amazon. I mean, it could be because on Kickstarter, it's a lot easier to juice the algorithm because there's real people behind it, and you can talk about what the book is, and like a small amount of readers at the beginning really help visibility through the rest of Kickstarter. Whereas with Amazon, it just takes so much more to juice the algorithm, because there's so many books that get dozens of sales a day. So
Right.
while 100 to 200 sales in the first day of of Kickstarter could like net you an extra $10,000 to $15,000, and because just the visibility is a lot more on Amazon, 1 to 200 sales in a day is going to do almost nothing for you, and it's definitely not going to sustain you for long enough for a lot of people to find you.
Yeah.
So that's why my plan. I'm not going to commit to this yet, but my plan is to test the novels on Kickstarter, because they do sell well at shows.
Yeah.
Like they're good sellers at shows, and really see if the issue is Amazon or the issue is people not caring about the novels. The other thing is Kickstarter is a finite, not resource, but time frame. You can do things to get people excited. With Amazon, it's just almost impossible to get the same people excited, because it will be there forever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to build that urgency. I mean, there's so, we've talked about them on this show, but Kickstarter, just baked into its DNA, has so many things that have been proven for the last 20 years to compel people to back and buy now. Whereas, like there's, it's easy to go to Amazon, and then before you know it, you're buying more dog food and checking out some deals on DVDs.
Well, the other thing is, on Amazon, even aside from the other stuff, like you're competing with every book that's ever been made on Amazon.
Right.
And you are like, someone has to be like, well, Russell Nohelty's nice, but like, I really want to read this Stephen King book. Right. Or I really want to read this Nora Roberts book, or I really want to read this Terry Pratchett book. And like, Terry Pratchett is like Terry Pratchett, and Russell's just Russell. So I like him on Kickstarter, but like on Amazon, it just takes more, and it takes longer for people to say. Someone said something to me the other day. They were like, Amazon is all about finding people when they're ready to buy, and Kickstarter is all about getting people excited to buy when you want them to buy. And that's why I think, like, I don't do ads for Kickstarter, but I do. You've got to do them for Amazon, because that's the only way to find people when they're ready to buy. Whereas with Kickstarter, I can use the power of community and the power of like my network to draw people, to draw this like sort of rubber band back until it's so tense that everybody is like, when can I buy this? 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 And then when it snaps, it can cause like a great effect that first day, where just Amazon, you don't have any of that. Like, you can play with it a little bit with like doing price pulsing and stuff, but at the end of the day, that book will be on Amazon forever.
Right. It's hard to create the same kind of urgency. So one of the things that you just touched on briefly, and I believe you have a course that shares some of the insight on this, but how many books did you write last year? Like, how many novels did you write?
I wrote 20 books in 20 months. So 20. I believe it was 15 books last year, 3 in 2017, and 2 this year, in the first 2 months of the year.
So that's a lot of freaking books. What kind of flow was that? What kind of daily writing ritual was that? And what were the keys to doing that? And do you ever see yourself doing, I know you said you're going to take a break from writing books, but is that something that you would ever see yourself attempting that again?
Not unless I had a series that was really selling well. And I mean like selling like gangbusters, because then you want to get in as easily, like you want to get in as fast as possible and make sure people have content, because once they're in your series, they will keep reading your series until the end. But once they stop reading it, like it almost doesn't exist to them. And not just them, to me as well, like to everybody. That's kind of how it is. So there is a very specific kind of book that you can write very quickly. it's sort of the old Doc Savage, like Doc Savage or Dick Tracy. It's one character has one mission and one goal. They're very fast-paced, thrillery kind of things that don't touch a lot on the topics that I like to cover, which is like death, grief, loss, like perception, reality. The darker things that you touch on, the more distance you need between books. And I know that because the 2 books I wrote this year were both very dark. One was an allegory for depression, and one was an allegory for grief. And they were just, one was about the girl that was dealing with her sister's suicide, and the other one, she was dealing with the death of her best friend. And like the girl she loved more than anything else. And like, I wrote those back-to-back months, and afterwards I needed 3 months to recover. I just couldn't do it. Whereas, fantasy thriller is sort of what I write, or like funny fantasy thriller. Like the 3 Katrina books are like very fast-paced. Something happens every 2,000 words. They're plotted within an inch of their life, and those are very easy to write fast because you're dealing less with the character and more with the plot. So plot-driven books are very easy to write fast. Books that are plotted beforehand. So I don't think you can really pants a quick book, although some of my friends disagree. Especially a book in a series, because you need the mythos to be correct. It's hard to pants that because
pants is just right up by the seat of your pants, right? Yeah. Not so, without a strong outline.
The longer a series is, the more you need like to get the mythology right at the foreground. And I mean, not just because I write fantasy, but science fiction or mystery or anything like the world, things will happen in the world during each book. So you need to know what has happened in the previous book and what will happen in the next book in order to go fast for a long period of time. I also think that books need to be short, like 50,000 words, 50 to 60,000 words is a good number for a book, because then you can sell it for $4.99 and it still takes you a month to write. I want a book that I can write really well in a month. And so those are the kinds of books. But they cut out a lot of kinds of books, like basically anything that's not predicated on romance or thriller or mystery or some sort of genre mechanic are really hard to write fast, because you can't just write to the next clue in a mystery or to the next plot point in a thriller. Right. If you're writing like a big realistic YA book that explores the meaning of life, those books need to meander quite a bit more. And I think to my credit, there are books that you can and should write fast, especially books that are supposed to be thrillers, because that phonetic pace like comes across in the writing and comes across in the reading. But then there are other books that I think it's a detriment to write fast, because they're not meant to be fast reads. They're not meant to only move the plot forward. They're also meant to explore something deeper. And so my process when I did this for all 20 books was very similar. I would get up at 6. I would start writing at 9. I would finish writing at 2. Every hour I try to get 1,000 words in, and then books would finish in 2 weeks and they'd be off to my editor. By the time I had the next book plotted, the last book was to my editor. We had it down to where a book would be done, and she would have the last book edited in the next day. I would edit that, send it back to her, and then we had it in a schedule where like every 17 days we would have, like, I would get an edit back, or sometimes I would get the edit for one and then the next edit for another one. And it was beautiful as far as a productivity standpoint.
Yeah. You probably got a glimpse at what it's like to work in the James Patterson factory. Only it was you and your editor.
And one other reason to write fast is if you see a trend in the marketplace that you want to capitalize on, and you're at the beginning of it, and you can get 3 books done really fast, then you can, like right now there's the YA Fantasy Academy books are like the hot thing. So if you see that trend and you know how to write 3 books in 3 months, and you have covers, you can then plan to capitalize on that trend, because once the market is too saturated, it's hard to make money. and once the trend has passed, then it probably won't come around for a long time.
Right. Yeah, that was a question that Rob Moltari had. He said, how much does what's popular now affect or influence the projects that you're planning on producing?
I don't worry about that much. I mean, I clearly with the Cthulhu book, I planned to have the most popular thing. But with the Ichabod book, for instance, I needed something that I could stand behind for 5 years. And that's how my process has always worked previously, which is what book can I stand behind for 5 years and believe in? And that is a much different business model than most of Amazon, which is about making that book, making the money on the book, and then moving to the next book. And they rarely think about their back catalog. Most of the authors I know spend very little time thinking or conceiving of their back catalog. And it's generally because they're writing to market. And once the trend shifts, like they got to be on the next train, and there's very little overlap in that world. So I think that the way that I run my business means that I can look for things that are popular, semi-popular, and like an art style for comics that I like. But then it's about what do I think I can get behind for 5 years. And it's a lot different than writing quickly. And another reason why to not write fast is if you're that kind of person who wants to stand behind a book for 5 years, like you better have a book that's worth standing behind, because it's not just some other YA Academy book or reverse harem book or whatever the trend is. That's the book that like you have to go and convince people to read. And if it ain't the best book, they're going to be like, well, why even bother?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, so you cranked out those books last year and you were in a season, and I am a big fan of creators taking seasons, and not like, because I think it's kind of a myth of like work-life balance or even creative life balance is kind of a myth. Like you're, if your life's not going to be in balance when you're bringing home a newborn. Like your life's not going to be in balance when you're in med school or you're in college. Like it's going to get out of whack. And I think it's more on the totality of things. But so you had a season of productivity, of massive productivity, putting out these books. This year was then, all right, now I'm going to take essentially everything you've learned interviewing creators that have been successful on Amazon, writers that have been successful on Amazon, and implement a Amazon release strategy and cranking out these books that you wrote all last year, but you didn't release any of them, right? This, and so this was your big release year. I'm curious, like what was the initial game plan for how these launches were gonna release, and then how quickly into this were you like, oh crap, this isn't working as I planned?
Literally immediately. Like when the first book didn't break even. So the first book was a retelling of Katrina Hates the Dead with way more content. It was like there was a whole between issue 2 when Katrina leaves for the Hell Rift to fight the devil, and the beginning of issue 3 where she gets to the Hell Rift. There was like literally I added 10,000 words of information about what happened during that time, backstory, everything. And I was like, if this one does like this, and it was 99 cents. So right,
so how many copies would you have needed to sell for that to have?
Well, for that one, I was okay with it not breaking even.
But I'm curious, did you have a sales target in mind? 1,000 units.
Out of a 35,000 person mailing list at the time.
Right. But prior to that, like what was the most number of sales on Amazon that you had ever done?
So when I did the Sell Your Soul book, I think I did like 150 units of that, a month.
Right. I mean, that's a totally different market and niche.
Right.
For like fiction or fantasy fiction.
Well, I've never done a launch on Amazon straight to Amazon. So I don't think I can't really compare that. I can compare a launch that I've done on Kickstarter with the novel, but not everything I've ever put on Amazon before this year was dumped on there after a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not many sales, but I think I've never actually tried to sell anything on Amazon before.
Right.
But I kept that book pretty light. I needed $300 to break even on that book, and I was like, well, $300. I made $3,300 literally last weekend at a show for Katrina.
Yeah, but you weren't selling anything for 35 cents, were you?
No, I wasn't. But I made a calculation that if someone was willing to give me $30 for a graphic novel, they would be willing to give me 99 cents for a book. And that was a big mistake. That was not true. Some of those people did give me the $1, but those people probably would have given me $10.
Right.
And the people who weren't going to give me money weren't more interested in giving me the 99 cents than they were the $10.
Right.
Which is what I was trying to get those people who were on the fence about the God's verse to try it with the cheaper book. And like the minute that I saw that it wasn't doing the thing that I wanted it to do or needed it to do, I think it actually launched at $2.99. There was a time when it was $2.99 and then it went to 99 cents. So I'd have to go back and look at exactly how many copies I sold, but that one did the best of all the launches. That one was the best launch, and it still didn't come close to breaking even.
And then your second launch was like right on the heels of it too, right?
Yeah. So the problem with this year was that we were supposed to deliver Cthulhu is Hard to Spell in January. Like the books got into the port of LA in January 8th. So I was planning on, but then they had to go to Chicago and then Michigan and then back to me for some reason. Because they were being fulfilled in Michigan. So we didn't actually get the books done until the end of February. And so all of these books that I had planned starting in January had to be accordion sort of together to make the launches work, which is the bad idea. Don't do that.
Right.
But
and now, so the question, in hindsight, you delayed launching the books as planned because there was a delay to your Cthulhu book, even though this was a launch on Amazon for an ebook novel as opposed to a Kickstarter funded graphic novel. But you sort of had it in mind that I don't launch a new thing anywhere unless the last thing has been fulfilled. Is like, if you could go back, would you have changed that, or do you still feel like that was a good decision, given that there hasn't been the kind of crossover that you wanted to see anyway? I'm curious about that.
If I could do it again, I'd do a whole lot differently. Yeah. But I don't.
What would you do differently?
I would like redo the whole. I'd change the whole launch. Like I would make the books long. I would put the books in collections initially. I would delay each launch, so I only did one every 2 to 3 months. And I would focus on making each book profitable before I launch the next book. Like, because that's been my strategy for years in comics and in Kickstarter, was I focus on making the book profitable and then I do the next book.
What was it that Amazon had for you that lured you away from doing the thing that you've always done to go after this new place that new to you in the context of these things? Like, what was it that made you say, you know what, I've got this Kickstarter thing figured out. My last couple of books have been successful doing it a certain way, but now I'm going all in on Amazon. And actually, like, I remember talking to you and you're like, I don't have any Kickstarters planned for 2019 when this was going to be the sole focus. What made you say Amazon is where it's at, or Amazon plus the other wide platforms? Like, what was that?
A couple of things. The first is inventory. I'm not a huge fan of keeping tens of thousands of books of inventory.
Yeah.
And that also locks me into a specific time and place, and you need to be in a place to have inventory. Not a huge fan of Kickstarter. I've had that time between you end the thing and kicks and fulfillment, so I like that somebody would take that off of my hands. Also, I wanted to expand the market reach. I thought I had a good market reach in comics and at shows and on Kickstarter, and I thought I could reach a wider market with Amazon and novels, which is true. You can reach but it's also a much more less forgiving market over in Amazon as well. And I wanted to stop doing so many conventions, and I make my living on Kickstarter and conventions, and those two things mentally have broken me in the past couple of years. Honestly, like it's been between the just the supply chain and all of that stuff, and now with tariffs and everything that are potentially like looming for my printer that I've used forever. It was a nice, comforting thing to think that you could do something that you didn't have to deliver the books to, that somebody else would be responsible for that. But it was also a large part of it was just market reach. Like at some point I love all of you who are buy my books, and like I don't want you to go anywhere, and I hope that you loved the novels as well. But part of becoming a creator and reaching a certain level of success is that you need to expand into other markets and distribution channels to be successful. I also don't distribute books anywhere except for on Kickstarter into any other countries. And there's a big contingent of my readership who's in Australia and Canada and the UK and all of the places that people buy the book, but buy the Kickstarters too. And I wanted to take advantage of that. And I wanted something where someone could buy a book and then they could read it that day.
Yeah.
That's just, maybe if you buy a paperback on Amazon, it might take a week or so to ship, but in the world that we live in, it could take months to get that book. And the idea that someone could read it, love it, pass it along, and then the next book could launch, and then the person could come back and read the next book and the next book and the next book without it taking a year for me to produce, was very appealing, and still very appealing, honestly. Having a year go by where people don't think about Russell Nolte's books or how good they are, and then having to reignite that passion every year has been a challenge for my whole career. And luckily, the last few years, I've been very successful at reigniting that passion. But I know that that's fleeting. Every month, more and more books come onto the market, and assuming that you're just going to be able to have somebody sit and wait for you for a year, especially when you're not the hot new thing anymore, I think is people do that at their detriment all of the time. I mean, we can probably both name 5-10 creators who were hot for years and never capitalized on it, and now you passed them at a convention, and like they literally have not had. You could tell they have had no one stop by their table for all day.
Yeah. So the game plan that you had did, like, when sales came in, you realized it wasn't going to that this was not going to work as fast or as well as you thought it was going to be, and so you made some changes, you made some pivots to it. I'm wondering, like, from that sort of failure to meet expectations, like, what's like the biggest lesson that you learned in doing it?
People are the same everywhere. Like, it's Amazon doesn't change the fact that like they still want the anticipation of the book. They still want everything that Kickstarter wants. Like, they're not different humans. Amazon and people who release on Amazon would make you think that these are just absolutely different humans that exist. They probably do tend to exist in a less weird version of the America that I live in,
Mm.
but they are still generally humans with the same wants, needs, and everything that humans everywhere have. On a spectrum of weird, like people that go to conventions are like, this is not weird and very weird. Like they're like over here, like they're like here. And the people that vibrate on Amazon are probably somewhere more in the middle, but they end up having similar buying habits. And, but I'm going to revise the thing that I said slightly because it is true. But I think when we release things on Amazon and release things on Kickstarter and release things on at conventions, we tend to think that everybody likes science fiction, fantasy, and horror because I just did a show and like literally heard romance twice in that whole show. Like nobody just like wants a clean, wholesome romance book, and yet it's like one of the most popular books on Amazon. So our perception is skewed like way to the top of the vibration of weird chart.
Right.
And I've had a lot of success on Kickstarter at a convention. So when people were telling me these books are too weird to hit with a mainstream audience, I was like, whatever, man. Like my books like sell so well at shows, and they still sell well at shows. But like the middle of the country and the middle of the Amazon bell curve is at a much different place than we think it is in our bubble of Kickstarter and conventions.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So I want to actually jump into a couple of questions that came in from your group there. So we'll do just a little bit of a speed round here. Chuck Pinot asked, out of all the characters that you've created, who's your favorite?
So I have an answer, but I have to answer Ichabod now because we're doing the Ichabod thing, and that's
you
going
got
to be
Kickstarter
like I
coming up. Come on
be
now.
stupid to say anyone else, right? Ichabod wasn't always my favorite character. Like it took me years to resonate with, find out. Ichabod was like written in the darkest time in my whole life. I had moved to LA to try and be a screenwriter. Nobody was even taking my meetings. My manager couldn't even set me up on general meetings somewhere. I couldn't find work doing anything in 2010. I scraped together enough money to do this 8-page ash can for this book called The Wannabes. I took it to San Diego Comic-Con 2010 and got laughed at every meeting that I got in because it was a superhero YA superhero book. And why would they do it? Because Marvel and DC does it. I mean, joke's on them. I was just like 10 years ahead of my time because look at like the market now. The Wannabes would destroy right now. It's like a manga inspired a YA superhero book. But it wasn't the time of 2010. And so I came back and I was like in a bad place. I mean, I know I'm like not generally in a good place normally for people that know me, but Ichabod came from like the darkest part of me where like I was wondering like if I was like too broken to ever break in, that like my taste was that I was just like a drain on like my family, my wife. Like I would tell her all the time that she should like leave me.
Oh boy.
Because like there was just nothing. I had no skills. And every time I've read Ichabod for 10 years after that, like I felt that like human who was too broken to like thought he was too broken to succeed, like cresting over the 405 and like just coming up with the most insane idea of all time just to like piss off everybody in publishing. And like took me a long time to like find something to love in Ichabod because there was nothing about me that I loved from being back then. And what's nice about going back to it is it's almost it's me at 36 talking to me when I was younger and saying like, hey, it's not only the parts, it's like Ichabod is so cast off from society that like he's in a padded cell, and that was how I felt like at that time. And to look back and be able to tell him, that guy, like it is not only, you will not succeed despite the parts of you you think are broken, but because of the parts of you that think are broken is a very compelling story for me to craft now. It's almost like me pulling my younger self and leading them by the hand and saying, you can still be the hero of your own story. And so because of that 10-year gap, I think I have to say that Ichabod is my favorite now.
Interesting. Yeah. Coming back to it from a different place, but it's amazing how a piece of art, a piece of music, a drawing can pull you right back to either where you were when you created it or where you were when you read it the first time. And that is one of the most powerful things about art. And that's a character that definitely is obviously stuck with you and is a part of you. So
and it's stuck with so many other people. That's what I like. I think the idea that like this completely cast off human who feels like he's worthless, and then like he can redeem himself. I don't know. I wish I knew like what the thing is that like people latched onto with Ichabod, even more so than Katrina or Octa or any of the other characters that I've ever done. And I have to believe that Katrina and Octa are like wish fulfillment fantasies. Like there's like, what if you were just powerful enough to like kill a god? Like literally anything in your path, like you just can't be stopped. I think most people are not like that. Like most people like don't feel that way. Yeah. But I think it's very easy to feel like, oh, like I'm in this little padded cell and like I have the worst negative self-talk ever. And I can, even though I'm scared to death of everything, I can just take one step out and take everything one day at a time and like eventually find a way to be a hero, even if there's only one place in the world that I can be it.
I'm going to ask another question here. This one is from Raymond Leonard. It says, question for either Russell or Tyler. What can I do to get people that never use Kickstarter to back my book? It's a problem I'm having.
Well, what's nice about Kickstarter is in the past year, they rolled out the guest feature. They still have the guest feature, I hope. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have to sign up for a Kickstarter account to back the Kickstarter, which changed everything when I did the Cthulhu book. Because I got tons of people who just were like guest 43 or whatever their email was. So the easiest thing to do is to just tell them they don't have to sign up for an account and just be a guest. But if you're asking what the mindset shift is to get someone to back something on Kickstarter without having it in their hand the whole time, I think that comes down to you. I think that you have to convince them that you are going to follow through and that you are worth taking a shot on. And then once you do it successfully, people are going to be more likely to do it the next time and the next time and the next time. And once you've done a few of them, but for that there are two problems. I'm not sure exactly which one you had, but those should help both.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would point out, Raymond, check out the 2-part episode of ComixLaunch that I did, which is ComixLaunch session 068. These are sort of the 4 secrets to get potential backers off the sidelines. A lot of this is the mental aspect of it. But another thing that I'll say is, especially if you're someone who, you're getting the snowball rolling, you've got a lot of people that are in your world that you think, like whether you're talking about friends, family, coworkers, whatever, that you think should be backing your Kickstarters, but they're not. Don't take for granted the fact that most people still don't here in 2019 have a crystal clear understanding of how Kickstarter works. And don't be afraid to do a sort of, I wouldn't call it Kickstarter for dummies, but but send out a blast to your friends, to your family, to your coworkers, and it clearly explain, hey, here's how Kickstarter works. Hey, you might be seeing me out here pushing this. Here's why this is so important. Here's specifically how it works. And if you want to help, here's specifically what you have to do, and just lay it out for them, because people don't like to not feel like they they want to feel like they know what's going on and how to help. And it can be intimidating if you are not already a Kickstarter backer. All right. The other thing that I would say is that there are some people that are just never going to back your Kickstarter projects. So that's why it's helpful to be involved in communities of other creators that have access to other people, to lists of other people that are launching on Kickstarter, because it's super easy for someone that's backed one project to back another and another and another and another and another. And so to be able to cross promote with other creators that have access to backer lists and people that and can, with just an update, send a message out to people that have backed projects, that's going to make a big difference in the success of your launches going forward. So
I make so much money on launches from doing doing swaps of backer updates while the campaign's going on. But I think what I was going to say was to mimic what you is just, most people are never going to back you. That's why you need a huge audience. We had 1,000 people back that our last campaign, and our mailing list at the time was 50,000 people. That was 2% of the whole list. And while we cut it down to 10,000 or 11,000 people or whatever it is now, because a lot of them weren't engaging, a lot, it takes a lot to get someone to back your book. And I don't think that you should be upset necessarily with them not backing. I think you should be worried that you didn't build the audience enough and interest enough, because most people will disappoint you by not backing, but also people are very busy. So maybe they're using the excuse that they don't know what Kickstarter is, but they're trying to let you down because they don't grok the thing you're jamming out at. And that's okay. Just like you don't grok everything that someone else is jamming out at. It's incumbent on you through backer updates or finding other people or to find people who are grokking out. In fact, one of the things that was the most disheartening for me this year was to understand that Kickstarter people, and I've known this for years, Kickstarter people like backing on Kickstarter, Indiegogo people like backing on Indiegogo, convention people like buying at conventions. There is a pretty good overlap between Kickstarter and conventions, but still, people like buying at conventions, people like buying on Amazon. And every time you try to build that thing up, it is a lot easier to get a bunch of people who've already backed Kickstarters to back yours than to get a lot of people who have never backed a Kickstarter, even if they support you, to back a Kickstarter for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're spending all of your time trying to convince people that don't back Kickstarter campaigns to back Kickstarter campaigns, you're ice skating uphill, right?
I have a fan who will literally come, and anything that's new on my table, she will buy it. She will never buy it online. She will never buy it while it's on Kickstarter. But if there's $500 new stuff on my table, she will buy all of it at that time. And that is just who this person is. And a lot of people don't want to take the risk on tangibly not being able to touch the thing.
Or they like the ability to just buy it from you in person, and they know they're going to see you.
Right.
So yeah. So here's a question. This question was from Mark Lone, but there was also a similar question from John Rossetti. So I'll read Mark's, and I'll also share how John wrote it. And who knows, maybe Mark is actually John's friend. But he said, random question about advertising your workbooks Kickstarter on social media. Do you pay to boost or pay for an ad, an Instagram or Facebook? I've noticed my ad isn't being shown in my Facebook friends feed. And then John Rossetti said, I have a friend who's banging his head on the wall on a daily basis trying to generate art sales on Facebook. He shares as much as he can on his wall and in groups, and he doesn't utilize paid ads. It appears that Facebook is his only platform, maybe some Instagram. is not doing so well for him lately, and he appears frustrated on the verge of quitting. So because he doesn't seem to be helping his sales any. What advice would you give to Mark and to John's friend?
Oh, I'm going to stretch for a second because this is the most important question that I get asked all of the time. And it's on some level the easiest question to answer and the hardest question to execute. I will say one thing to piggyback on the last question, and something that Tyler said is, if some people do want to buy it from you in person and they know that they will see you. So every time I do a Kickstarter, I make sure they know that they will not get it if it does not fund. If they want more Ichabod. So I'm like, if you want more Ichabod, you must fund this campaign. Otherwise, I will stop producing Ichabod after this issue 8.
Yeah.
And I will wait for, I don't know, 5-10 more years. So if you want the book to fund, and if you want me to continue making things, then you have to back it now. And the same thing with the novels. People are like, well, when are you going to make more novels? And I say, when they're profitable, not before then. So if you want them to be profitable, back them when they launch. Yep. Otherwise, I'm not making more. And that's fine. Like, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But that is the pact that I make because I run a business. Now, onto this question. You've got to pull them off Facebook. I mean, you should run ads, I suppose, but you shouldn't run ads until you actually know what people want. And the easiest way to make them want, to get them to tell you what they want, is to pull them from Facebook's platform or Instagram's platform into your own platform, and then use those people as a testing ground to test things that you think will work. And then once you have a perfectly honed product and perfectly honed sales pitch, then you bring it to Facebook and Instagram, and then you can do the ads and everything because you know what works. If you're on my email list, you will have gotten 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago a link to the Kickstarter preview page that says, and the name of the thing is, "Can you help me?" And I asked everybody on that list to go to my Kickstarter page and tell me what they thought. They gave me dozens of suggestions. It was a nightmare. I had to redo the video. I had to re-upload stuff. I had to cut stuff. I had to add stuff. It was like days of frustration. But at the end of that, when I showed it to people again, everybody said it was great. And I've done that with every campaign that's been uber successful: the Monster campaign, the Pixie Dust campaign, and the Cthulhu campaign. Whereas people on my mailing list and are on my own platform. That's my platform. Mm-hmm. Aside from whether it goes in the promotions folder or somebody randomly puts it as spam, everybody gets that email on my list. And then many of those people open it, and then they are my best test subjects because they are usually buyers. I can see exactly who clicked on what thing, and I'm like, that person's a buyer, that person's a buyer. People who email me back get weighted with like how much they buy from me. Like, if their opinion is that they've never bought from me ever, and I don't think they'll ever buy from me, they still get an opinion, but I'm not redesigning a whole thing from them.
Yeah.
So the first step is you've got to get them off of Facebook to your own platform. And you've got to start using social media as an amplifier, not the end result. If you go to my Facebook page, my Russell Nohelty page, you'll see tons of stuff, which is just like memes about like death and goth people and like funny jokes about monsters and like fairy tales, and like all of those are just call outs to the right person to come to my audience. And then the pinned post is like, you get this free book for signing up for my mailing list. But the mailing list is the end goal.
Yeah.
Because then they're not on Facebook's platform, they're on my platform. And I can market to them any way I see fit that doesn't make them unsubscribe. And so you've got to be in more places probably than just Facebook or just Instagram. But the second part of it, once you have those people and you've got like your avatar and who's buying, is you've got to find a ton more people, man. you've just got to find, there's no way that there's enough people, that person has enough people. Every single time that I have ever gone and done an analysis of someone's Facebook page, and when they say they're not making any sales, it's because they have nobody that listens to them. They have like less than 1,000 people on their Facebook page. The posts themselves are not getting a lot of engagement. They're not being very engaging, and then they have nowhere to send them. The mailing list seems really, really, really annoying until you have something to buy, because it's still the only place that people actually go to look for deals and things to buy, really. They go to websites, or they go to, sometimes they see something in a feed when they're ready to buy, but my wife does this all the time. She sees something cool, she goes to their site, and what does she do? She looks through it, and then she joins the mailing list. And then once they have a sale, or once she's done her research, then she will buy from the mailing list. So that page is an ancillary piece of the puzzle, but you have to have home base.
Yeah. And Facebook itself is designed to keep you on Facebook. and it is true. Like if you want to use Facebook to get people to leave Facebook, you got to pay them. Like, I hate to say it, but Facebook, its algorithm does things where unless you're paying Facebook for ads, you want to buy an ad, they'll give you a nice little link button, buy now, like shop now, like they'll let it show you, they'll let you click on Instagram posts and leave, whereas you can't put links in normal Instagram posts. Like Facebook and Instagram are designed to keep you on those platforms, and so it does become very tough if you are just relying on organic reach, especially if your pages are getting on. But even if you have there are pages, like sometimes I'll go and I'll check pages that are massive followings, like 50,000, 100,000 people, and you see just their organic posts still reach just a tiny fraction of the total number of people that are following them. You'd think it would be much, much bigger, but that's just. I
look at Adam Ellis's or the other people's webcomics that I follow, and it's like, oh, that's 2,000 people that reacted out of like 1 million.
Yeah.
That day, which is like, it's a very small amount, and there's some people can do it. It's like some people can will virality without ads, like some people, but you can't plan for that. You can't plan that you're going to be the guy who just gets viral one day and like suddenly you've got 1 million followers and everyone wants to buy your art. Yeah.
And I do realize though, like, especially for people that haven't started a mailing list, and then people that do start the mailing list, like they're told they do, and then they send out a couple emails and they just hear absolute crickets. When they're used to, even if they only have a few thousand followers on Twitter or Facebook, they post, or Instagram, they post a cool feed and they get a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 100 likes or shares or hearts or whatever, versus that email they sent out that's just, like was the similar, an engagement email, but not necessarily selling anything. And they don't get anything back. And so people love that instant feedback from the social media and the loves and the likes, even though you can't buy likes, you can't spend any money on likes. It's usually not until you actually go through the process of doing like a full-on Kickstarter launch and track where those backers are actually coming from, where you realize, oh crap, that email list is huge. And we had a creator that was in ComixLaunch Pro, and he basically decided to soft launch on his first launch, and his launch was scheduled for Monday. Decided to soft launch on Sunday, just sending it to the small email list that he had been building in anticipation of this launch. And he was funded on day one, much to his surprise. And it's just like, oh wow, this really does make a difference. But you got to have faith of it until you actually get into a launch to see just how powerful it is.
And just most people don't reply to emails that are not every once in a while, I have 11,000 people, 15,000, whatever's on my mailing list. I'm not happy if I get 10 replies unless I'm asking a question.
Right.
Because, that's just not how email works. I only reply to my friends' emails because I know that I'm probably the only person replying to that email. And so I'm like, hey buddy, good email. This is a good, I enjoyed this, just because it is kind of hard to be like, does anyone like that thing? But then when you do a launch, that's where they're buying. So that's why I like the idea of augmenting the mailing list with a page that has like a lot of other things, because then you're engaging with the audience. You're not necessarily even selling them your thing. My posts very, very rarely even talk about my own stuff, but most of those people are also on my mailing list. So they are building connection with me on one platform, and then when it's time to buy, they have that thing there. And some people will buy on your some people will buy on your mailing list on Facebook too. Facebook and Instagram, and my mailing list are always like fighting for 1, 2. Yeah. But that's because there's so much cross-pollination also. A lot of people on my mailing list are on Facebook, and Facebook on my mailing list. So I think more likely it's just like one ecosystem, and when they find me, they buy from that thing. And I have friends who said that Twitter is their number one because that's where they're focusing their energy. I happen to focus it on Facebook and Instagram, but other people, I'm sure people focus on Pinterest, see the Pinterest be their number one thing.
Yeah.
But also, so this is going to be really hard, is the best way to scale is to do the unscalable, which is to reach out to people and make real connections. I was just listening to, I'm a huge hippie leftist, so like I listen to Pod Saves America and all of those like political podcasts. And someone was just on today, the head of the Wisconsin DNC, and they're like, look, all the algorithms are great, but there is no substitute for talking to people one-on-one. And it is true, making connections one-on-one, not making connections one-on-one and then like offering a sale, just like literally making connections. This morning, I just had a conversation with somebody, and like I was like, this is a really weird conversation. And they're like, oh, well, I'm sizing you up for like to see if you're fit for this marketing opportunity. And I was like, oh, well, I just wanted to have like a conversation with a cool human.
Right.
And like, no wonder this conversation has gone so sideways, because like we have two different aims. My aim is to make a real connection with someone, and your aim is to do whatever thing that you wanted to do.
Right. He's fitting you into a preconceived, plan, or you're a lead and he's a human. You're looking at him as a human. He's looking at you as a lead.
Right. And that's one of the things that makes shows great, is there's one-on-one conversations all day, but that doesn't mean you only have to have one-on-one conversations at shows.
Right.
You can have one-on-one conversations. We're having one right now. You can have one I like to just message 5 people every week just to see how they are.
Yeah.
But those kind of things are like not scalable. Like they tried to scale it with chatbots, and now that business is crashing. And so, still people buy for connections, and the mailing list is a connection, and the thing is connection. So I don't know if any of that helps, but the deeper feeling of connection that your audience has with you, the more likely they are to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to blast through a couple of quick questions, but we're going a little bit long here. So I want to respect your time and wrap up on a couple of good ones. Brett Giuliano asked, any advice on putting together an anthology project? Do you personally reach out to artists and writers, or just open it up for submissions? I will say, Brett, if you're thinking about putting together an anthology project, go buy Russell's anthology course. It's very affordable, and it's all there for you. It's all there for you. But quick thoughts on these are basically 2 different styles: open submissions or personal invites.
Sure. I did write the course, and this, interestingly, it was meant to be a complement to Tyler's course, which I've never told him before, because when I went to make a course, I was like, well, I'm not making a ComixLaunch course. Like, that's very well handled by Tyler, but I can make a course that is very specific to anthologies, because I think the easiest way to break open your career is through an anthology, because now you have not 1 or 2 people, but dozens of people pushing the same project. And if you do it right, and that anthology lines up with the other person's, with the other work that you do, you're going to get massive crossover and massive buy-in from the people that bought the book. even if other people are bringing them in, they're coming to your list, you're delivering their book, they're going to get it, it's going to be awesome, they're going to read your story, and then you can do the next thing. So actually credit Tyler with a lot of the reason I made that course, because they're a nice 1-2 punch, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I will say a strategic anthology will be one of the easiest ways, as you said, to take a significant level up in your launches. So, Brett does a cool, like, sort of anamorphic gangster comic, cartoon comic, doing a mob themed anamorphic anthology project where he rallies, the best, like some of the best up and coming web cartoonists to do that. Do an anthology around that. I guarantee you, it will do. It'll help you level up from your last launch, and then whatever you launch for your next thing on the back end of that. Now that you have an audience that is bigger after that launch, it's sort of like it's a force multiplier. So, but
I will. So,
but on the
submissions.
Okay. Yes. Submissions or reach outs.
I think you should do closed submissions first, because the first anthology, so this one, the Monster and Other Scary Shit anthology, I had asked all of the people who back my work and I see at conventions what's their favorite thing, who they want to work with, and why, and then I created the theme of monsters around what they said, and then I wanted to prove that I did it well so that other people would want to be involved in the next one. So the Monster Anthology was the test case pretty much for the Cthulhu book, which is open submissions. But I didn't want it to get too big or unwieldy, and I wanted to make sure that if I screwed up, the only people who knew I screwed up were the people that I already knew. So I didn't want a bunch of random people seeing me fail from the inside. Mm-hmm. I wanted friends to support me, and we all make something cool together on the inside. So I do recommend closed submissions first. And I do recommend, though, asking the people who are already in your audience and other people what kind of stuff they want to see from you. And the other reason I think closed submissions is, like, as a writer, and as on the writing side for myself, like, I was never going to work with a bunch of other writers. Like, I write my own stuff 99% of the time. So if I wanted to work with writers, I had a list, dozens of people long before I wanted to work with. But with artists, the same thing. Like, I have a very specific style. If you look at the books that I have, I like to believe you can tell that it's a Russell Nohelty book just by looking at the cover, at least of the comics, because they all have a style. So for me to work with a lot of the artists who I knew that I loved, but I would never be able to work with in that capacity without something magical happening, I wanted the anthology to be able to allow us to do that. So it was sort of scratching my own itch, scratching an audience itch. And because I knew that the people's jams were monsters, that they all had monsters in their audience, that they all liked monster stories, I was able to create a community of people that loved everyone else's story, which made the outreach during the campaign so much easier, because everyone loved the books, everyone loves monsters, and you don't get that as much with open submissions. Yeah. You don't really know whether somebody is going to help you promote, but you can with closed submissions because you're reaching out to everybody. Specifically.
Yeah, and I also think, until you've established yourself as someone that can put out an awesome anthology, it may be harder to get an open anthology than it is if you take avid interest in someone and you pitch them on being a part of your anthology. Most write, and I think you've sort of famously said, you will say yes to anyone that asks you to be a part of an anthology. I don't know if that's still open.
single time that I say yes to an anthology because like I want outreach. I want to get into a new audience. But that first one, I really pitched everyone and I was like, I would love to work with you, but I will never work with you because like our styles just don't match. Like you're a writer, I'm a writer, like it just doesn't make sense. But like I really want to work with you on this project. And I know you love monsters, I love monsters. And it was a very personal thing that allowed me to work with some people that I desperately wanted to work with. And I gave a lot more latitude. Once you have done a good one, you also then can like make the rules.
Yeah.
Like the first one, you can tell several things in that anthology that I won't go into here. But once I had it all, and I like then the process landed a successful anthology. The next one, I was like, here's the rules. I'm super strict. I'm going to be anal about these things for these reasons. I already know all the things that are going to come out to be wrong. And you're going to follow my instructions because that is what you get. Right. And then I could hold up the first book and be like, this is what you get, but way better. And the second anthology ended up being like 100 times better than the first one, which was a good anthology. And the next one hopefully will be even more than that because the process gets refined with each time. But I think that the most compelling reason to do a closed submission is you get to work with artists that you love and respect and do something that you won't be able to ever do just without them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it'll also, I can guarantee you it'll also save you a lot of time too in sifting through.
You know, people are like, quit dicking around. Like, come on, man. Like, are you really in this thing? Or are you not in this thing? Or you can talk to them on a different level that you can't talk to people who you don't know.
Right. All right. I want to wrap up. Two more questions to wrap up.
Stay here answering questions for as long as you want to stay here answering questions. But I'll also go and answer them on somewhere else. I'll just talk to myself and answer myself.
All good. So we mentioned a little bit, but I want to just hear a little bit more about this. And I know creators here will want to hear about it as well. But book marketing has been a significant part of your revenue generation picture. I noticed you've been publishing on the Complete Creative your income statements. And so first I want to know, like, how has that been, just putting it all out on the table, like, and doing those each and every month? Because it's something that I actually, when I first started ComixLaunch, it's something that I said I wanted to do. And I did not get in the habit, first because there was no income for ComixLaunch for a while. And then there was the complexity of keeping that up to date was like, I don't have those hours in the day. But how has those income, how has publishing those income reports been for you, just as something to do?
I haven't put a lot of energy and effort into growing the site. It's more than organic site traffic. So it hasn't grown as much as I want. And thus the income reports aren't getting the traction that I want. But it's brutal to put that all together and see where every dollar comes from. On the other hand, it's great to see where it comes from and what you can do each month. I always fear, the thing I fear most at the end of every month, the beginning of every month, is doing that income report at the end of it and being like, I don't know where the money's coming from. Like in August, I didn't have any show that I did. I had no marketing things coming up. I had no book marketing like launches planned, and I had no shows scheduled. So I literally was like, I might just have a 0 month. I don't know. I'm sure I'll make a couple $100 from something, but like that's going to be a brutal income report. Literally, I fear that more than living out the moment, because I've built my career on showing success through my own success, and I honestly fear what would happen if someone was like, "Oh, so now it's all just a house of cards, huh? It's all having 4 months slide, or like the end of the year just being like brutally bad." Like, I don't, like, what if next year is not as good as this year? Then, like,
Right.
what happens then? So, or like when I put in the amount that I've got a book coming out called How to Become a Successful Author. And like, when I put the number that I've made on Amazon, it's like, I'm like, am I a fraud?
Yeah.
For this? But I think that it's the best way for somebody to understand what it takes to be successful. And I've been very adamant from the beginning of my career to put it all out on the line, because the person that helped me the most when I first got it started was Jim Zub. And Jim, like, I never met Jim until years later. So maybe 2000 and whenever I had him on my show, 2017, maybe it was when we met. And I was reading his stuff from 2000 and whenever he started posting about Skull Kickers and being transparent, because before then I was like, oh, well, like, success is just this ethereal thing. And if I'm not successful, it's a me problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think it was eye-opening for a lot of people that just assumed the image eye on a book meant you'd made it, and all your cares are over, and you're now a comic creator, and everything's money rolling in, and you can afford to pay all the artists anything you want. And yeah, it's very eye-opening stuff.
It was like eye-opening. So when I started doing this, I was very adamant not just to talk about the successful parts, but to open everything, because I wanted people to understand that it's like, success is not a you problem. It is a you problem to solve, but just because you have this thing called success and you like make 6 figures a year, or like you have a $40,000, whatever the thing is, it's like, well, like that still doesn't mean everything. Like, there's still all of these components and all of these things that go into them. And one of the things I'm going to look very much forward to when I'm older, grayer, is to be able to have like almost an unbroken chain from 2006 to hopefully when I stop doing this, of just like what it takes to be successful, from like my first blog post in 2007 when I was writing to everything is going to be encapsulated, the good, the bad, and the income report, whether I continue it next year or not, is a part of that. Like, it will at least encapsulate what being a successful creative meant for 1 year in my life. And I think that's important.
And so one of the items on there is book marketing, which has actually become, a significant part of your revenue generation picture overall in what you do and what you offer. But for creators that aren't really sure, like, how you can help them market books, and what do you offer in that capacity, and how can creators work with you in that capacity?
I mean, it's almost all mailing list builders and then courses, because the easiest thing for me to give you, the most effective thing for me to help you to do is build a mailing list. And the easiest way to do that is for me to hand you an email list of thousands of people at the end of a promotion. Because look, man, when you have 100 people on your mailing list, like, it's real easy to give up. It's real easy to not go forward, or it's really easy to start later. But like, if you get a mailing list with 5,000 people on it, or 3,000 people on it, or 1,000 people on it, it's like, oh, I just gave money to this person for this thing, and now I have this list, and I need to do things with it. It also, one of the things that we do is social media building also. And one of the things you see once you hit 10,000 people on your social media is it unlocks a lot. Like, it unlocks, especially on Facebook, like, you just somehow get 10 times the comments that you did when you were at like 1,000, or probably, that makes sense. But probably even more than that. When I went over 10,000 on my Facebook page, I just started seeing grips more engagement, where instead of 10 likes, I was getting hundreds of likes for the same kind of post. So my goal in that is to build out people's presence until it's fun to do. It's been a long time, Tyler, but do you remember when you had like 10 people that followed your stuff and how hard it was to get up to do stuff?
Yeah.
So when we do these promotions, a lot of these people are getting 200, 300, 500 new followers on Instagram in like a week. And they don't have 500 people on their Instagram at all. And it makes things a lot more fun if like 500 people are following you than if 10 people are following you. Because then you're actually getting engagement and you can do things. There's this sort of what word am I looking for? Like a bell curve, or like a critical mass.
Yeah.
Critical mass that like once you get there, things start making sense. But most people don't get there. Most people never get there. They only have 100 people on their mailing list. When they send a Kickstarter email, it's like, oh, I got 1 subscriber. And like, that's good. Like 1 out of 100 is good.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine getting 10 out of 1,000 or 100 out of 10,000 or like that's scalable. Like the problem is like people don't hit that critical mass, so they're not able to properly understand what it looks like. And that was me for years. For years I had a couple thousand people on my mailing list and we did pretty good, but like I was like, I don't know, like it's going. But then we did that. I started building the list and suddenly like everything changed because I was like, oh, I'm not making $1,000 on a Kickstarter campaign. I'm making $40,000 on a Kickstarter campaign. This is way more fun.
Yeah, it's the crazy thing where it does not take more energy to raise, like when you're building on a platform, like you may think it's more work to raise 40,000 or 30,000 or 100,000 than it is to raise 5,000 or 3,000. Not necessarily the case. It's all about who you're launching it to and the audience and are they ready for it.
And how many other people are ready to help you on that thing? Like I'm on this because you're helping me out. And part of that reason is because like I've helped you out. You've been on my show, but also I've sent emails out about your stuff and like they've converted and like that. Once those things start happening, suddenly people are very much more anxious to work with or excited to work with you because it's no longer a favor that they're like doing to help you out. It's like, oh, well, you have a huge audience too. Like we could both really benefit from that. And the promotions you get into when you get to that extra level, the amount of people who know your work, the amount of exposure that you get, you also start finding people just hand your books off to other people, which is something that that might happen like once out of every 10 or 20 people that get your book. But when you've got 10,000 people in your audience, suddenly it's happening so much that your reach is expanding out in such a way that the ripple effects are just huge. And you're finding people that come to your page and you're like, I remember the first time that I did a Kickstarter campaign, and I was like, who are all these people? Because I used to be able to know exactly who was coming, but then it came to the point that people knew my books and my name preceded me, and then the books that I made preceded me, and suddenly like people were talking about it in ways that I was like, I don't know, and literally any of these people are, but it's great because it means the things are working. And so when I do book marketing, I mean, you can hire me to do a single promotion for you or to do like social media building for you, but it's just so much more effective to do it in a group of like-minded people because the price is the same. When I run a big promotion, like the price is the price, and it's amortized over a bunch of people or it's amortized over you. And while you do get more effective, stuff doing the single person, I don't think it's 20 times more effective. And then there's also Facebook ads and other stuff, but like I try and keep it as cheap as possible for people and giving them the most impact. And the biggest impact that I can give somebody is the psychological shift when they go, oh crap, I've got an audience now. I suddenly magically have an audience. Last week I didn't have one, and now I've got one. And now I need to learn how to actually talk to them and figure it out. And once you can break that nut, then you can scale easily.
So what's the best way for people to find out how you can help them, like, or get on, or be aware of the next thing going on?
So if you go to russellnohelty.com/viral builders, that's where all of the current viral builders that we've launched, that we have open are. You can also just email me at russell@wannabepress.com. Also, if you go to that viral builders page, you can get on our mailing list for when new things release. I also do like a bunch of courses and other stuff. And my goal is to give as much knowledge away for free while still being able to pay my mortgage.
Well, we're going to be hopefully helping you do that by sending a few more creators over your way. All right, Russ. Well, we've been going hour and 40 minutes, and I think we've been rocking and rolling here, answered a lot of questions, and this is good. It's great to check in with you. And I know we've got this will air during the Ichabod campaign. So one quick final pitch for Ichabod for anyone that might be interested in checking it out, the new series that's on Kickstarter.
So Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter is about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes the hero of the apocalypse. But except he doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time. It's like Lord of the Rings if Lovecraft wrote it with a big injection of humor. Because I love Lovecraft, but God, that guy does not have 1 ounce of funny in his whole body. So it's a big overall fantasy world. Issue 5 is live now, and we are introducing in the 5th issue our Gandalf into the world, Necromonica, which is the first wizard of the apocalypse who uses the Necronomicon to do all sorts of cool wizardy stuff. The book it will ship hopefully January or before, and the nice thing about Ichabod is you can very easily Google Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, see all of the reviews. You can see what people think about it. But if you like Giant of the Homicidal Maniac, like big overall fantasy worlds, and like a lot of humor that maybe you shouldn't be laughing at, it's going to be your jam. I try and keep all of the books, all of the issues of Ichabod feature big monster battles, big splash pages, and a whole lot of humor. And if you go to the Kickstarter page, you can also get the 1st issue for free and get a preview of the 5th issue. And that you can do if you're listening to the live stream at russellnohelty.com/Ichabod Kickstarter, or just look up Ichabod Jones or message me and I can give you the link.
All right. Well, sounds good, man. I'm sure this is going to be another awesome launch for you, and hoping the second half of the year exceeds expectations for you.
That would be amazing.
Awesome.
Hopefully for you too, and for everyone listening.
Yes, let's all kill it before the economy crashes and we're all doomed.
Oh, I like that last thing you said, better than all the other less than all the other things you said.
Yeah,
it's true, but
yeah, you know what? So many like people are always going to need a break from their miseries, and that's what we artists do. So we create our own economies. All right, my friend. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for everybody else for listening. And can't wait to see what you all launch next. All right.